stops as well. It all depends on traffic and it all depends on where we can get parked, but hopefully we'll get a few photo stops in on this tour. We're going to get through the suburbs first of all. So as we're driving through the suburbs, let me give you a bit of history to London before we get to see the sights, because London itself lies on a tidal river, the River Thames, which is tidal up to a place near Hampton Court called Teddington, where you get the first lock on the River Thames up there. Teddington means tidal settlement. The River Thames, at 215 miles long, longest river within England, and its name is possibly of Sanskrit origin, believe it or not, Tamas, meaning dark, the dark river. Also the origin of the River Teme, the River Tame, the River Tamar. So the dark river that flows through the Cotswolds and then through Oxford down towards Henley, Marlow, Reading, eventually into London, where, as I say, it is tidal here. An estuary just to the east of London meant that invaders and settlers could travel that way into London. So it was an important settlement in Celtic times. Celts arrived in this country about 500 BC or BCE, so 2,500 years ago. The legendary founder of London is a man called King Lud. We've got Ludgate Hill, by the way. That would take you up initially to where King Lud would have had his court. And the Don of Lundon comes from an old Celtic word for a ridge. So King Lud's Ridge, Lundon. The word Don, also the word dune as in sand dune, and the word down as in downland, as in high ground. Down, dune and don all mean a ridge, the old Celtic word. So London means King Lud's Ridge, and King Lud would have somehow maybe had some sort of settlement where St Paul's Cathedral is now. That area is the oldest part of the city. Now the Romans arrive in 43 AD, so the Celts are already here. The Celts have their own culture, their own society. The Romans pop over in 55 BC and 54 BC under Julius Caesar. More of an exploratory mission, but eventually under 43 AD, under Emperor Claudius, the Romans invade. But London wasn't the capital. To begin with, it was Camalodunum. Camalodunum is now the town of Colchester. It was burnt to the ground by Queen Boudicca, often is seen as a symbol of Britannia. Queen Boudicca, the queen of the Iceni tribe, her husband had died and the Romans had taken over her land. She was, of course, not pleased at this. She burnt London to the ground, possibly in the year 61 AD. There's, in fact, if you dig down far enough into London's clay soils, there's a charred layer of soil, said to be the year 61 AD, when London was burnt to the ground by Boudicca. She is the symbol of Britannia. And she took poison rather than be captured by the Romans, and it's said she's buried under platform 10 of King's Cross Station, somewhere down there. But nevertheless, during the Roman occupation, eventually Londinium became the capital of Roman Britannia. It had been initially Camalodunum until Boudicca burnt that to the ground as well. So Londinium became the fourth largest Roman town north of the Alps, and of course the River Thames provided that vital artery and access to the rest of the Roman Empire. So Londinium, and the city of London, Londinium, its Roman street pattern in certain parts still exists today. One of the most famous roads was Wattling Street, and if you look at a map of London, Wattling Street comes in from Kent, and it's the Old Kent Road. The Old Kent Road comes into London. It would then go over London Bridge, which was nothing like the bridge we see today. It would have been a pontoon bridge, so it would have been like a series of boats with wooden planks across it, forming a bridge, a pontoon bridge. And the Romans initially built that one. That was the first ever crossing, official crossing over the River Thames. And we didn't have another London Bridge. Didn't have another London Bridge till much, much later. We built them, rebuilt them several different times. In fact, London Bridge was the only bridge over the River Thames until Westminster Bridge was built in 1750. So remember, just one bridge. And the initial Roman bridge would have been some form of wooden structure, and then you'd have followed the north line of the River Thames along Strand. Now that's still Wattling Street, you see, Strand. And then eventually you go up Edgeware Road. Edgeware Road is again part of this Roman road, went all the way up to a place called Deva Victris, which is Chester, the town of Chester today. Now, that wouldn't have been called Wattling Street when the Romans were around. They didn't call it Wattling Street. They didn't call the other roads Ermine Way or the Fosse Way and all the different names. They were names given to it much, much later. It's believed the Romans just numbered their roads and named it after the emperor at the time. So you could travel on Augustus 6 and turn left on Nero 3. That's what the Romans did. That's how they labelled their roads. So this road would have had a number. We don't know what it would have been, but we called it Wattling Street, which is a Saxon name much, much later. There is still a stretch of that road near St Paul's Cathedral that still has the name Wattling Street. And the Roman street pattern, the grid pattern around St Paul's, almost stayed the same for quite some time. It's changed a little bit now, especially after the Great Fire of London, when of course the city was replanned, but there are still some Roman roads left. The Romans also taught us to travel on the left-hand side. Well, why do we drive on the left? Because the Romans taught us to do as that. You know, the Romans travelled on the left. They met their opponent coming into battle on the right. You see, you get on your horse on the left-hand side. Most people get on a horse on their left-hand side. So our friends from India, yes, you drive on the correct side of the road. There you go. Yeah, and the left-hand side is what the Romans taught us to do 2,000 years ago. We're still doing that today. And they gave us the measurement of a mile, 1,000 Roman paces. So all our street plans, all our street speed limits, I should say, and distances are in miles. Although that is why one American we have on board still uses miles. Oh, two Americans, you as well. One, a young lady from Chicago at the back. You use miles. Yes, a Roman measurement, which we've been using, and we did introduce it across the Atlantic as well. So yes, we everything. As you're new in this country, just remember all our road signs, our speed limits are in miles. Don't hire a car and see the sign 30 and start driving 30 kilometres an hour. You'll annoy all the other motorists because you'll be driving too slow and you'll be getting in their way. So remember 30 miles an hour, and remember, of course, we drive on the left. So the Romans left around the year 410. And they left this city abandoned, you see. And in fact, when the Saxons migrated over here, they ignored the Roman bit. We do have a short section of Roman wall, which I will be able to show you, just outside the Tower of London. It's only a very brief glimpse as we drive past, and the top bit is actually medieval. But I will be able to show you a small section of the original Roman wall. And not only that, when the Romans left, it was under Emperor Honorius. A series of rather weak Roman emperors, attacks in Rome by the Visigoths and Attila the Hun and his friends, so they recall their legions from here in the year 410. Angles, Saxons and Jutes migrated over here from land which is now part of Denmark and Germany and the Netherlands, and they migrated over here and they settled here, and this was known as Ludenwic during the time of the Saxons, and this was the kingdom of the Middle Saxons, so it was known as Middlesex, as it still is today. And we will still refer to Middlesex, even though that county has disappeared. The cricket club still has the name Middlesex, the Middle Saxons. So they settled just outside the main city to the west, and Aldwych, that's believed to be where the Saxons actually settled. And for a while we had trouble with the Danes, the Vikings, attacking this country and pushing the Saxons towards the southwest. So we have a church in London called St Clement Danes. It's where the Danes worshipped. And at one point, at the time of the Dane law, Wattling Street, that Roman road I mentioned, was the border between Danish territory and Saxon territory. The Danes had pushed the Saxons towards the southwest, but they never got into Wessex, the kingdom of the West Saxons. Alfred the Great, the king of Wessex, defeated the Danes at the Battle of Ashdown in 871 and Eddington in 878. So they never got into the West Country. So London was right on that division. There was a Danish side to London and a Saxon side to London. And there was a lot of conflict between the different Saxon kingdoms as well. And there wasn't really that unification, even right up to the time of the Norman conquest. William the Conqueror was the man that really made London the capital. Alfred the Great had Winchester as the capital. So for many, many years, other places were more powerful, and Winchester for quite some time was the head of the kingdom of the West Saxons, and also because that was the most powerful Saxon kingdom, really the capital of the country at the time. It's William the Conqueror that made London the capital. Why did William come here? Well, William actually was the illegitimate son of Robert the Devil of France. He was actually known as William the Bastard, but he was the cousin of Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor was king of the English people, and he of course resided in London, but there was still lots of trouble, lots of different warring factions, including the Vikings. Edward the Confessor, however, had died in January 1066, and on his deathbed he said he promised the throne to his brother-in-law Harold Godwinson. And Harold said, well, you definitely whispered in my ear that I'm going to be the next king. And everyone said, well, did you really say that? Oh, yes, he whispered in my ear, 100% certain he definitely gave the throne to me. But William, the cousin, said, no, he promised me the throne. When Edward had spent time under my protection in Normandy, in France, away from Viking raids, he said that you will have the kingdom when I die. So basically, Edward the Confessor has died, and no one's sure who he'd promised the throne to. William claims it, Harold claims it, Harold's brother claims it, and a Viking claims it as well. So Harold is taking the throne, and his own brother Tostig also wants the throne. Harold Hardrada, the most powerful Viking, wants the throne, and William, Duke of Normandy, wants the throne as well. So Harold raises an army, goes up to the northeast of England, and a combined army of Tostig and Harold Hardrada fight Harold just outside York at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, which has got nothing to do with Chelsea Football Club. Okay, the Battle of Stamford Bridge, if you ever hear about it, isn't taking place in the terraces of Chelsea Football Club because they've just lost to Liverpool or what have you. The battle took place outside York, and Tostig and Harold Hardrada, they are killed. The battle has been lost. Harold is victorious. If he hadn't been victorious, we'd probably all be speaking Danish now, you see. But he did win, but he lost a lot of men. And then he found out that William was invading from the south, from Normandy, 700 battleships, 14,000 men. His tired and weary army had to go all the way to the south of England, and just outside Hastings, he was to meet William's army and meet his own destiny, because Harold was killed at the Battle of Hastings, and William then marched on London to make London his capital. Now, it took him 2 months to get to London, not because he was slow. He took the long way round to avoid any Saxon resistance. When he got to London, he had himself crowned King of England on Christmas Day, 1066, at Westminster Abbey. From then on, known as William the Conqueror, a name he preferred to William the Bastard. So William the Conqueror, the King of England. All the other previous kings have been King of the English. William the Conqueror said, no, I'm King of England. This land is mine. So he then had to give thanks for all the help that the Pope had given him. He had a massive abbey building programme. Started to rebuild Westminster Abbey here in London. So a lot of abbeys and monasteries were founded by William the Conqueror because the Pope had helped him. Harold's coronation had been taking place here in London, but the priest that did it had not been ordained officially in the Catholic faith, which is why the Pope sponsored William instead. So because of that, William went on this massive abbey building programme, and also built a lot of castles as well. And here in London we have the White Tower, which is the centre of the Tower of London complex. 90-foot tall tower. This keep, this square keep with 4 smaller towers on the top of it, was the tallest building that anyone had ever seen in this country. In fact, it was literally the tallest building in this country. 90 feet high, built of limestone from Caen in Normandy. William the Conqueror brought the stone over. His stonemasons built this huge tower, and it's still there today. William then went on this huge castle building programme, building castles every 15 miles, because that's a day's march. From the French word je, meaning a day, a day's march is 15 miles. So he ringed London with castles. Windsor is one of those. Windsor, Berkhamsted, Guildford, Rochester. He ringed London with these castles and then built them all around the country to secure his power. And of course he made London his capital. So really from then on, the monarchy has resided in London. This is the capital. The city now has a population of over 9 million people. It suffered from plague, it suffered from fire, it suffered from the Blitz. We'll go into all those different details. It's said now there are about 300 languages spoken in London now. It's extremely multicultural, but also it's got about 9 million, which can swell to about 11 million during the working day. And of course we're now getting back into working again. We'll start seeing more and more commuters coming into London. At the moment we still have people working from home, so fingers crossed we won't be stuck in too much traffic. It can be occasionally a pain to get through, but if we can get these roads as quiet as this one, then we'll be able to do as much as we can sightseeing. We're actually heading down now towards King's Cross and St Pancras, so this is taking you down to, can we go past the stations? King's Cross and St Pancras? Yeah, brilliant, okay. Well, I'm going to show you my favourite building in London, and I think it's the favourite building of a lot of people, St Pancras. St Pancras railway station, I love it. I think it's gorgeous, and it was very nearly demolished in the 1960s. For Harry Potter fans, you'll see St Pancras in the Chamber of Secrets, because when Arthur Weasley's car is taken by Ron and Harry, it flies out of St Pancras rather than King's Cross. But King's Cross, platform 9 3/4, is located inside a main railway station, and it's actually very busy, full of commuters. So they've recreated a platform 9 3/4 just outside the main station area, where they've got a Harry Potter gift shop as well, but you can't actually go to the very physical location between platform 4 and 5 where they did the filming, because you need a ticket to get there, and it's full of barriers, and it's obviously a busy working station. But when it came to doing the Chamber of Secrets, they used St Pancras next door, because it's got a more Hogwarts-esque look to it. It's a magnificent building. It was designed by Sir George Gilbert Scott, and it's not the railway station, it's actually the hotel in front of the railway station. A lot of people think that that's St Pancras railway station. It's not. The railway station's at the back. The railway station, in fact, you can even see the roof down ahead of us here. That's by William Barlow, a huge glass train shed built in 1868. And in front of it, Sir George Gilbert Scott built the Midland Grand Hotel, which was a working hotel for railway travellers up until 1936. Then it closed down. And a great big hotel. It didn't have any ensuite facilities, and it had concrete floors, and they realised it was going to cost a fortune to turn all the rooms ensuite, so they just simply closed the hotel down, and they left it as railway offices for a while, and most of the rooms were empty, and they stayed empty until 2007, when it reopened again as a hotel, the Renaissance Hotel. So it is a hotel now, but it was abandoned for many, many years. And if you want to know what it looked like when it was abandoned, just watch the very first video the Spice Girls made for Wannabe, because it was all filmed in the empty rooms of St Pancras Midland Railway Hotel. So yes, so if you like the Spice Girls, Harry Potter, or just love Victorian high Gothic architecture, then you'll love St Pancras Station. We have to do a little wiggle round here before we get up to St Pancras, but next door is King's Cross Station. King's Cross is good for travelling to Scotland. That's the trains from Edinburgh to London go from King's Cross. If you're travelling from St Pancras, you'll end up travelling to the English Midlands or to Paris, and also to Brussels and Amsterdam. It's the international station as well, so it's not just a regular station. St Pancras is also the station for the Eurostar trains to Paris. It takes about 2.5 hours. Brussels takes 1 hour and 45 minutes, and Amsterdam, which takes about almost 4 hours. So you can go direct by train from there. And I'm hoping while you're here you'll get the chance to travel, and those train services are far better than a plane. You might think, well, the plane's quicker, but all the checking in to do and everything like that, and the cramped conditions, the train is actually quite luxurious compared to being stuck in a small plane. So yeah, you'll use that over here at King's Cross St Pancras. And I'm going to show you the building we went past. Sir George Gilbert Scott was a great Gothic revivalist. In the 19th century, we started to do a lot of medieval style buildings. And that was really because we thought, well, we've got this big empire. The British Empire covers 1/3 of the globe, and we're jolly nice people, so let's just imagine we're chivalrous knights of old. And we started to paint in this style that goes back to medieval styles of painting. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, for example, were painting in medieval style. We start to see the church going back to high church medieval decoration, and we start to see them painting inside the churches again, which they never did. They're going back to a more Catholic style, and then building these structures that look like they were built in medieval times. And it was all to do with this idea of chivalry, and that the Victorians were good at being chivalrous knights of old. And it was more of a cult than an actual strong belief amongst most people, but it did give us the Gothic revival of architecture, which St Pancras is one. This is King's Cross here, and we have a building now with a wonderful clock tower. St Pancras is the patron saint of lost causes, which sometimes you think when you're missing a train, that's a bit of a lost cause. And there you go. Look at that tower. Look at the bell tower there. And the thing that's neat, and the poet laureate Sir John Betjeman, he helped save it, so his statue is inside there. Sir John Betjeman was poet laureate, and he was a great fan of architecture, and he helped save this from destruction. So that's the hotel you're looking at now, not necessarily the railway station, but access to the railway station is through the entrance there. So that's St Pancras Midland Railway Hotel by Sir George Gilbert Scott. Actually, to build the railway line, the actual library now this has a free museum. This is excellent. You can go in here and see a collection of historic books and artifacts upstairs in the British Library, free of charge. It could be anything, because they change it every so often, but there's a copy of Magna Carta from 1215, so an original. There are only 4 that are left from 1215. One is in Salisbury Cathedral, one's in Lincoln Castle, and 2 of them are here. So that constitution was drawn up by a king, by the Pope. He got his own. He decided to take a French nobleman's fiancée as his own queen, Isabella. That angered the French, and they took a lot of John's territories. A lot of English territories were in France, and they were systematically taken by the French. And he started to raise taxes considerably to pay for these wars against France. And the barons revolted and forced John out to put a document, put his seal on a document. 63 clauses, and perhaps clause 61 is the most important. The authority of a king can be overruled by a parliament of 25 barons. So it's a very important document and one of our only major constitutions, and that can be seen on display at the British Library, along with lots of other things. We've got the first draft of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, for example. You've also got the Beatles and their original song lyrics. So there's all sorts of different stuff, and it is free of charge to visit in the British Library. So you'll find that most of our museums here are also free of charge as well. So you have a fun day out visiting the British Museum, National Gallery, National Portrait Gallery, Victoria and Albert Museum, Natural History Museum, exploring all these museums free of charge. Because of the COVID situation, you now need to book in advance. You can't just turn up, but certainly these museums are free. So behind the British Library was old St Pancras Churchyard. I'm talking about Frankenstein. That's actually where Percy Bysshe Shelley first met Mary Wollstonecraft, who became Mary Shelley. She was laying flowers on her mother's grave, and he first met her there. So the old St Pancras Churchyard is also where they had to remove some graves to make way for the railway line, and the poet and writer Thomas Hardy was working for an architectural firm at the time, and he put these graves all round a tree. So you got this wonderful old tree with graves all round in a circle, and it's called the Hardy tree because of Thomas Hardy's involvement in moving those graves round. So this is bringing us up now towards Madame Tussauds, and that's one of the museums where you do have to pay for, and most of the London termini are along this stretch of road here. So we've got St Pancras, we've got King's Cross, and further along you've got Euston, and this is the bottom end of Regent's Park. Regent's Park is my favourite London park, and what you can do with Regent's Park, keep walking up to Primrose Hill, and when you go to the top of Primrose Hill, it's one of London's best viewpoints within the centre. Okay, you've got some fantastic viewpoints further out, but if you're in the centre, you want a park that's a little bit more formal than, let's say, Hyde Park, with its trimmed hedges and rose gardens and water features. I think this is my favourite park, really, out of all the others. Regent's Park, named after the Prince Regent, and a regent is someone who rules as if he were king. His father, George III, had what was known as porphyria. They didn't know that then, they just thought he was as mad as a brush. But his son, who was Prince of Wales, ruled as Prince Regent, as if he were king, because his father unfortunately had health issues and was put out to pasture. So the Prince Regent is actually the Prince of Wales, and he later became George IV. So when we talk about the Prince Regent and George IV, we're talking about the same person, you see. So Regent's Park, Regent Street, and all those names with the word Regent is really referring to the Prince of Wales, who was Regent while his father George III was still alive, but was unfortunately had mental health issues. So Regent's Park, yes, you keep walking along up past London Zoo, and after you've gone across from London Zoo, outside Regent's Park, you can walk up Primrose Hill, and on the top of that hill you can turn around and get a lovely view of London like a carpet below you. So this is Madame Tussauds, and again that's one of the museums you will pay for. The planetarium is the huge copper dome that's no longer in operation now, but Madame Tussauds is on the right hand side, and she was a French Huguenot refugee, came here to spend time in London. These wax figures that she used to create. Originally she'd done them during the French Revolution. She came over here, and the Lyceum Theatre was originally used to house the display of Madame Tussauds wax figures. Then this building over here was purposely built as the displays that you see today. And then the building looks even larger next door. There's the headquarters of the London Metropolitan Railway. And the Metropolitan Railway used to build its trains out, or lines, railway lines out into the countryside, so known as Metro Land. And people commuted by electric traction into London from the suburbs of the north, and they arrived here. And then the street that runs across here is Baker Street, and this is famous for Sherlock Holmes, 221B Baker Street. The museum and shop isn't exactly physically 221B Baker Street, and if you want to see where they did the filming, you have to go back a little further to Gower Street. North Gower Street is where they do the filming for the Benedict Cumberbatch series. But this is where Arthur Conan Doyle's character would have lived. Baker Street, also famous for the song by Jerry Rafferty as well. So we're going to wind our way down to Baker Street now, and that will take us into the centre of London.